At 3 a.m. on February 2nd, 1502, a cry echoed through Ferrara's ducal palace that made guards lower their eyes and diplomats exchange knowing glances. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was the sound of a political ritual so explicit, so carefully orchestrated, that Europe's most powerful families had kept it hidden in locked archives for 5 centuries. Inside the crimson-draped bedchamber, a 22-year-old woman was transforming her body into the deadliest weapon Renaissance Italy had ever seen. This wasn't romance. This was warfare conducted between silk sheets, where every gasp carried the weight of treaties, every touch could topple dynasties, and consummation itself became irrefutable proof that would determine the fate of nations. When historians finally unsealed the documents, they discovered something that shattered every assumption about marriage, power, and sex in the Renaissance. The ceremony had been performed 3 times in one night, and every moment had been witnessed, documented, and certified by officials hidden behind velvet curtains. The woman orchestrating this spectacle was Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, survivor of 2 disastrous marriages, and master of what would become known as sexual diplomacy. Her first husband had fled, humiliated by accusations of impotence. Her second had been strangled to death inside the Vatican itself, victim of her family's brutal politics. Now, entering her 3rd marriage to Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, she understood something her enemies didn't. In a world where women were traded like currency, the only way to survive was to control the transaction. But this marriage came with unprecedented stakes. The alliance between the Borgias and the Este family could reshape Italian politics, creating a power block that would force France, Spain, and rival duchies to recalculate every strategy. The wedding contract specified a dowry of 100,000 gold ducats, enough to fund entire cities for years. Yet the real price would be paid not in gold, but in flesh, in a bedchamber transformed into both sanctuary and courtroom, where witnesses would certify that this union had been sealed beyond any possibility of annulment. The date itself carried explosive symbolism, the feast of the purification of the Virgin Mary, when the Church celebrated sacred cleansing. By aligning the most intimate act of marriage with this holy day, the Borgias and Estes fused the divine and the carnal, making consummation not just a sexual act, but a ritual of dynastic sanctification. And they would perform it 3 times to ensure no enemy could ever question its legitimacy. Lucrezia's entrance into Ferrara on February 1st had been staged like theater, a triumphal procession where she wore a French gown lined with ermine, diamonds and rubies catching winter light as citizens cheered. But behind the spectacle, something far more calculated was unfolding. In the palace corridors, spies positioned themselves, scribes prepared parchment, and Isabella d'Este's personal chancellor took his hidden station to record every detail of what would happen behind locked doors. Isabella d'Este, Alfonso's sister-in-law and the unrivaled star of Ferrara's court, had already sensed the threat Lucrezia represented. This wasn't just about a new bride arriving. It was about power being redistributed, influence being challenged, and Isabella's own position as court's leading woman suddenly vulnerable. So she did what any Renaissance politician would do. She weaponized intelligence gathering, placing her spy where he could document the most intimate moments and create evidence that could be used later if needed. But what neither Isabella nor her chancellor anticipated was that this wouldn't be a cold political performance. Something had shifted during Lucrezia and Alfonso's secret meeting at Bentivoglio weeks earlier. The attraction between them had been immediate and genuine, complicating every careful calculation. What was supposed to be ritualized duty now carried the voltage of authentic passion, and that unpredictability terrified the courtiers who thought they controlled every variable. Alfonso d'Este wasn't like other Italian nobles. At 25, he forged his own cannons with bare hands, played music with elegance, and embodied both warrior strength and Renaissance refinement. Where Lucrezia's previous husbands had been weak political pawns, Alfonso radiated a power that didn't need proving. The collision between these two forces, Lucrezia, weaponized through seduction and survival, and Alfonso, embodying raw, pragmatic strength, created chemistry that no treaty could have predicted. As midnight approached, the stage was set. Crimson velvet curtains enclosed the ducal bed like theater drapery. Silver candelabras flickered against Flemish tapestries depicting wars and alliances, reminders of what was truly at stake. This room had been transformed into both sanctuary and stage, where the most important political performance of the decade would unfold. And hidden in the shadows, witnesses waited to certify that what happened next would be documented as irrefutable proof. The protocol was ancient and absolute. For noble marriages in Renaissance Italy, consummation wasn't merely intimacy. It was a legal certificate, binding proof that heirs could be born, alliances secured, dynasties continued. But proof required witnesses. The royal bed became a courtroom. The act of love became a verdict that would decide futures. And Lucrezia, hardened by betrayal and murder, understood this better than anyone. She had learned from her first marriage that public humiliation over impotence could destroy political value. She had learned from her second that weakness in the marriage bed meant weakness in politics, and weakness in politics meant death. This time would be different. This time, she would not be a victim, but an architect, turning the very system designed to control her into her greatest weapon. When Alfonso entered the chamber, both he and Lucrezia knew their roles, but something crackled between them that transcended performance. The spark they discovered at Bentivoglio had grown into genuine desire, and now that desire had to be harnessed and displayed as proof. What would unfold wasn't merely a private act, it was ritual rooted in centuries of aristocratic custom, where every sigh carried political weight and every touch would be analyzed by hidden observers. The first consummation began with an intensity that surprised even them. Real passion mixed with political necessity, creating energy that neither had anticipated. For once, duty and desire aligned. This wasn't just staged, it was lived. The witnesses, positioned behind tapestries and in adjoining chambers, with doors left strategically ajar, recorded the sounds, the duration, the proof that this union had been sealed completely. Isabella d'Este's embedded chancellor took meticulous notes. To outsiders, this might seem invasion, but in court eyes, it was duty. The bedchamber was simply an extension of the treaty room, and every cry was political testimony. The record he created that night would become more than gossip. It would become a binding document, a certificate of dynastic legitimacy that could protect the Este Borgia union for decades, a guarantee against annulment, against plots to undermine the marriage, against the excuses rival powers used to launch attacks. The second consummation, performed hours later, demonstrated something beyond mere virility. It showed Alfonso's psychological steel, his ability to perform under pressure with the same discipline he showed as military commander. For Lucrezia, it revealed the survivor's instincts that had kept her alive through betrayal and blood. Together they transformed a dangerous test into triumph, proving that this marriage was not just legitimate but unbreakable. The third and final consummation, executed near dawn, sealed the ritual completely. This was no longer just bonding two individuals. This was creating a living alliance, a new axis of power between the Borgia and Este families that would force every rival duchy to recalculate their positions. The official records provided legal and political validation both houses desperately needed. The alliance was now anchored in something irrefutable, documented, witnessed, certified sexual union performed multiple times to prevent any possibility of dispute. When the cry that opened this story echoed through corridors at 3 a.m., it marked the completion of the third consummation. Guards lowered their eyes not from embarrassment, but from recognition that they were hearing history being made. Diplomats exchanged glances because they understood this wasn't ordinary passion. It was the enactment of power's most intimate protocol. By dawn on February 3rd, two individuals had been transformed. No longer simply bride and groom, Lucrezia and Alfonso emerged as architects of a new political reality. Their successful execution of the dynastic ritual gave the alliance a foundation so strong it would ripple across Italy for decades, showing the world that sexuality, when harnessed strategically, could be the sharpest weapon in a ruler's arsenal. The reverberations spread immediately. Rivals who had prayed for the marriage to collapse found themselves powerless against documented proof. They could no longer dismiss Lucrezia as a tainted pawn or Alfonso as merely a soldier. The record stood irrefutable. This union was both legitimate and unbreakable. Almost overnight, Lucrezia's position within the Este court transformed completely. No longer a tolerated outsider, she became essential. Her survival was now tied directly to the dynasty's survival. Her death would bring chaos, so her presence guaranteed stability. For the first time in her life, Lucrezia Borgia was untouchable. Alfonso too emerged stronger. His performance had proven not only virility but resilience under impossible pressure. Where other noble heirs had faltered, humiliated by annulments or whispers of inadequacy, Alfonso had triumphed spectacularly. His reputation as Ferrara's true successor was no longer questioned but established as fact. But not everyone rejoiced. Isabella d'Este, who had ruled court life as the unrivaled star, now faced a dangerous rival. Lucrezia's success had transformed her from target into force. The rivalry between the two women, already tense from their first meeting, exploded into silent war. Ferrara became a stage for psychological combat, subtle gestures, whispered rumors, quiet contests for influence that would shape the court for years. The documented consummation also reshaped Italian geopolitics. France, Spain, and rival duchies were forced to acknowledge the Este Borgia bond as a consolidated power bloc. Diplomatic calculations shifted. Treaties, trade routes, and military strategies had to be redrawn around the fact that the Borgias and Estes had successfully fused into one political entity. Yet politics wasn't the only battlefield. On the 5th of September 1502, Lucrezia gave birth to a stillborn daughter after convulsions in labor. Rumors erupted immediately. Was the child conceived on the wedding night or during secret meetings before Ferrara? Chroniclers obsessed over the timeline because paternity wasn't simply personal, it was political proof of legitimacy. Lucrezia nearly died herself, struck with childbed fever. Many women didn't survive such ordeals. Her recovery was viewed by contemporaries as proof of divine favor, evidence of her strength, reassurance that she could still provide heirs. But the ordeal changed her. Confronting death in childbirth hardened her understanding that survival in this world demanded more than beauty or obedience. It demanded strategy. This new clarity led her down another dangerous path. About a year later, she entered into a relationship with Francesco Gonzaga, Marquis of Mantua and the husband of her bitter rival, Isabella d'Este. It was an affair born not only of passion, but of calculation. By choosing Isabella's own husband, Lucrezia struck at her rival's pride while securing another line of political protection. The affair was carefully hidden, yet its impact was seismic. Letters between Lucrezia and Francesco, uncovered centuries later, reveal both authentic emotion and political cunning. She wasn't merely manipulating him, she found genuine connection. Yet that connection doubled as insurance against enemies. Her ability to balance this affair, while preserving her marriage to Alfonso, showed the mastery she had developed over sexual diplomacy. For Isabella, the revelation was devastating. To lose influence at court was one thing. To lose her husband's attention to Lucrezia was an attack both personal and political. The rivalry that followed would haunt Ferrara's court for decades, transforming every social gathering into a battlefield where glances carried the weight of daggers. Lucrezia's affair with Francesco Gonzaga, sustained for years, became a new model of Renaissance sexual diplomacy. These weren't fleeting romances, they were tactical extensions of politics. Aristocratic affairs became safety nets, diversifying networks of protection, just as kingdoms diversified their alliances. Other noble houses soon followed, weaving their own webs of lovers and confidants as shields against betrayal and exile. Meanwhile, the legitimate heir's Lucrezia bore Alfonso cemented her position beyond dispute. Each birth was living proof that the legitimation protocol of her wedding night had succeeded. With every child, she was no longer simply tolerated, she was indispensable. The Este dynasty's survival was tied directly to her body, her resilience, her ability to deliver continuity. Her evolution was extraordinary. Once a pawn trapped in the brutal mechanics of dynastic marriage, Lucrezia had transformed into an architect of her own fate. She turned the vulnerabilities of her gender into tools of power, showing that strategy could coexist with survival. Where others were broken by circumstance, she mastered it. The wedding night of February 2nd and the archives it left behind remain one of the most detailed windows into how Renaissance marriage diplomacy truly worked. Strip away the fairy tale gowns and poetic vows, and what remains is raw calculation. Unions forged not for love, but for power. Consummations staged and documented to prevent annulment. Sexual protocols designed to anchor alliances in something irrefutable. The template pioneered by the Borgias and Estes spread across Europe. Documentation plus witness consummation became the formula for unshakable alliances. Royal bedchambers transformed from private spaces into courtrooms, where sexual performance itself determined the fate of empires. Even after their deaths, descendants inherited not just lands, but a methodology, a cold, precise system where the bedroom was as crucial to politics as the battlefield. Lucrezia's transformation from pawn to power broker stands as one of the most striking examples in European history of a woman seizing agency in a world designed to crush her. She proved that intelligence, courage, and strategic intimacy could bend the rules of a system thought immovable. Her body became her weapon. Her survival became her victory. And the night she was consummated 3 times before witnesses became the foundation of a dynasty. But here's what should terrify you most. This wasn't unique. The archives of Europe hold countless similar secrets nights, where royal beds became stages, where witnesses documented intimacy, where women turned vulnerability into power through methods so explicit they remained classified for centuries. Lucrezia's story is only one shard of a hidden mosaic. What other royal bedchambers hid witnesses behind their curtains? Which other dynasties anchored their legitimacy in documented sexual performance? How many women throughout history weaponized the very system designed to control them, transforming their bodies from prisons into arsenals? The truth is still buried in locked archives across Europe. Vatican secret libraries, family vaults in Milan, Florence, Venice. State records that governments won't declassify because they reveal too much about how power actually worked. The ritual Lucrezia performed wasn't an aberration, it was protocol. And if one 22-year-old woman could master it so completely that her story survived 5 centuries of attempted erasure, how many others succeeded and then vanished? If this revelation about witness consummation ceremonies shocked you, imagine what else remains hidden. Give this video a like if you want medieval survival to keep breaking into Europe's forbidden archives and dragging these secrets into the light. Drop a comment naming the queen, duchess, or courtesan whose darkest protocols you want exposed next the most. Mentioned will star in our next investigation. Subscribe and ring the bell, because these truths are only revealed to those who dare join our brotherhood of historical truth seekers. The past wasn't romantic. It was brutal, calculated, and written in bodies used as weapons. And we're just getting started uncovering how deep the deception goes.